one of the things that I have to say is that we as an African people do not have to depend on the educational thrust of people who classify themselves as white. We One of the things that is so prevalent is the understanding that white people do not see us as fully human individuals. They are so set to see us as inferior and will stay inferior. And that is why we are still in a state of slavery. Our minds are enslaved by whites, and they want that to be a fundamental basic of life for us as feeling inferior. And that has
Well,
to be understood.
okay. Well, you've stated, of course, in your works, and I've read this and I've heard you talk about it before, that symbolic thought influences our decisions, society, our religion, our culture, and the perception of ourselves and the world around us. Can you explain a little bit more about how symbolic thought influence those things?
Yeah, exactly. Symbolism produces mythology and superstition.
Mm,
Of the most superstition geographical areas in the world is Africa and India. India surpasses Africa in terms of being superstition, in terms of their feeling. They even feel in more inferior to us. So it has to be made clear that thinking symbolically destroys every avenue of authenticity. Thinking symbolically is a mental illness. When the great scholar, psychiatrist at Harvard Medical School,
Alvin Poussaint.
Poussaint, Dr. Poussaint,
hmm
asked the American Psychiatric Association to classify racism as a mental illness. And they responded in a very unique way. They stated that they cannot classify racism as a mental illness because it's the norm of American society. That's a very, very sick statement. And that shows you the mental illness of why we think symbolically. We make up stuff. We have great superstition. Superstition destroys our behavior patterns. And let me be clear about this. It's very interesting. It's interesting that uh, if symbol systems, if symbol systems never left Africa, there will be no such thing as racism,
mm,
no such thing as religion, period.
mm,
Now that
mm,
can be upsetting to a lot of people because initially we are a very religious population, or we think we are a religious population.
mhm.
Point is that we are a very sick population, and that is why we see the problems we have to exist today.
hmm Thank you very much for that answer. That helps a lot of us to have a better understanding of this. The American Medical Association, as you pointed out, what Alvin Poussaint, the psychiatrist, said, the Harvard psychiatrist, who of course was a very brilliant man. But the AMA stated that racism is a threat to public health. And I think this also is in line with your point about racism being a mental health problem. But many times people say that they don't want racism. I've heard this discussion. They say they don't want racism to be classified as a mental health problem because then, if it's a mental health problem, then white people are not responsible for it. That it is just mental health, and you're not. If you have a mental illness, they say you're not responsible. So that's the one of the debates too. I mean, to say that it's a norm in the American society is also to talk about the impact and the influence of eugenics on everything in education. But I just wonder if the American Medical Association says that racism is a threat to public health, is that the same thing, or do they mean the same thing, that racism is a threat, or how do you see that?
Well, one of the sad aspects is how racism has affected the health of people all over the world. For instance, uh, President Trump has reneged and gotten out of the World Health Organization.
Yes.
It's the only reason that President Trump opted out of the World Health Organization is that the World Health Organization is run by Ethiopian, a Black African. And for that insane reason, for opting out of the World Health Organization, showed you the sickness of American society and the sickness of, matter of fact, of him. So we have to understand, and a study by African women in California,
UCLA.
States,
UCLA.
at UCLA states that whenever a Black person leaves his home, whether it's for real or symbolically, his blood pressure goes up immediately because he feels what he has to face, and what he has to face affects his blood pressure and his heart. And that is one of the reasons that Black people die quicker. Matter of fact, it's been stated that the lifespan of Black people in the United States is the lowest in the world. And let me be clear about this. I've traveled globally, in Europe, in Asia. I worked in Asia for over 40 years, 44 years off and on. One thing that we have to understand is that Black people are considered the worst of Homo sapiens in the world, but they treat Black people differently. The leading European scientific textbooks will tell you they think and treat Black people differently than any other Homo sapiens breathing.
But it's a very interesting contradiction, given the fact that that Homo sapiens started in Africa, that the first Homo sapiens are Africans, that before 70,000 years ago, before migration out of Africa, everybody in the world was Black. So it shows you how those people who left Africa in the last 70,000 years have basically flipped the script and are not claiming that the Africans are at the bottom, or that is the way the symbol system has created it. And the mythology has created it that way, so that wherever you go, you see that. And I think it may be evidence of the whole doctrine of white racial superiority being spread around the world.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, if you look at the newest research that white people come up with, they're always coming up with research that they feel proves that indeed African people weren't the first people.
DNA research.
They want to, and even when they admit that all of us came from Africa, they even try to assume that white people are the ones that
who came from Africa and left, right?
Exactly. They created Egypt. They did all this work coming back from Africa to from Europe to Africa, and they created all the great things that happened in Africa.